Howdy everyone, welcome to Escaping Dystopia. My name is Roy. Today is August 23rd, 2018. Tonight's episode is entitled Criminal in Chief. Not sure if you guys are all getting a lag on that side, but let me see if I can help out a little on that. Alright. Probably not so much. That's okay. Hopefully we can turn this off later when we need to. As we do here on the show, we're going to run through real quick today's news with our Just the Facts version, and then talk about the fun stuff once we want to do that. Anybody else wants to join in? As always, feel free to make comments or derail your own conversation. It's all good. We're all having fun here. So, on with the big news for this week, doing some fact stuff. Michael Cohen, the personal attorney to the President of the United States, pled guilty to multiple counts of law-breaking. Paul Manafort, the campaign chairman for the Trump campaign 2016, also was found guilty on 8 of 18 counts in Virginia. That's his campaign manager. We'll talk about both those and their relationship to one another a little bit. The Catholic Church found guilty. I want to give a quick shout out to Sinead O'Connor. Got a lot of crap back in the day. Sounds like, from what we saw this last week, from what happened in Pennsylvania, there was some severe, nasty sexual corruption going on in the Catholic Church. Urban Meyer was found guilty. This is a little bit of the change of the standards of what is expected of leaders in society, and he was suspended for 3 games for not being forthcoming regarding his actions around an assistant coach who he knew to be involved in domestic abuse. The President of the United States appears to be a criminal. This is a factual statement, it appears. Normally, in the situations where you have the kind of conspiracy to violate a campaign finance law, all of the conspirators would be indicted. However, there's a long-standing Justice Department policy that you do not indict a sitting president of the United States. We'll discuss a little bit about how that's going to look moving forward here in a little bit. Hopefully we're going to have some tonight on a bit on cheating and fairness. I should actually probably do a whole shizzo on that, and considering the late nightness, I might actually move that to its own thing on Sunday. ICE is cheating immigrants. They are doing some very misleading things in order to catch people. I would also like to point out, as we will in the next segment after that, that there are still over 500 families who have not been reunited after the zero-tolerance policy put in place by the Trump administration. They continue to, what's the factual way to say this? I guess stonewall almost, that's a little bit harsh, to not help to facilitate the reunification of families, in fact claiming it is directly not their responsibility after the parents are removed. We'll talk about some of the stuff that's been going on around that. There was a bomb in Yemen a couple weeks ago, where I believe a large number of school children were killed. It was a school bus that was shot by guided munitions owned by Saudi Arabia. The investigation into those munitions determined that it was the United States that had manufactured and sold them. The reason why Saudi Arabia had those particular weapons is because they were approved for use by Saudi Arabia by one Rex Tillerson last spring. The Inequity update, we'll talk a little bit about that later. Our trade war update has expanded. The second round of sanctions, or I should say tariffs, slightly different, very different, 2 different words completely, have gone into place on China. You'll start to see higher prices on a lot of consumer electronics. In my case, things like vaporizers and quadcopters and other things like that coming over from China. So far we see no signs of real abatement for the trade war, and the two sides continue to not say much. We've also seen continued South China Sea shenanigans, which is to say a bit of military posturing from both armies. And North Korea continues to develop nuclear weapons according to various intelligence reports. In Mississippi, they're about to update their Medicaid work requirements. In order to qualify for Medicaid, there will be two different things you have to do. One is work at least 20 hours a week, and the other is have a yearly income of less than $3,000. So, you can figure out how that all works out. Alright, so that's enough of that, and we'll move on and go ahead and get to the real show. Alright, let's get this turned off, if we can. I always have weird problems getting this stuff off. Alright, now we're getting better. There we go. That's going to be a lot easier on the phone. Alright. So, howdy everybody. Went through the main stuff this week. Covered the big news. Straightforward. Now let's have a little bit of fun. Let's see what time we're looking at. Wow, only an hour late, Roy. It's all good. So, Michael Cohen flipped. He didn't flip yet because he hasn't become an official witness for the government. But he did plead guilty this week. This was the personal attorney for the President of the United States, has admitted to committing many crimes, at least 8 counts. In particular, what we're talking about here are a couple of payoffs to mistresses for the President of the United States. He paid them off right before the election. This is illegal in a number of ways. This is all coming out now. More to come on this as this kind of dribbles out over the next few weeks. What's already come out has been so big that it's really hard to kind of digest so far, right? And then there was an interview even this morning where the president's trying to do damage control and then says, no, those weren't campaign money, which would have been bad, because he's an idiot, he doesn't understand this stuff. That was my personal money. So he's now claiming that it was his personal money that paid for it, but he didn't find out until later, whatever that means. That's one of those things where investigators want a little bit more specifics on when you found out about the payment that you made personally, because it wasn't campaign money, it was paid by the Trump organization. So anyway, all this stuff is a whole web of law breaking. Pretty much every one of these things is a felony, both from non-disclosure of these to, he signed and the president did, he signed on penalty of perjury, so he is actually under oath for some of the documents that he signed when taking the office of the presidency, including those that declare expenditures like this. And he didn't mention these, so that kind of non-disclosure is the kind of thing that he's not enforcing the law on, like his own family, but this is with Kushner's repeated amendments for assets and whatnot, all of which non-disclosure of these is supposed to be felonies. So that was really big, and now they're actually also teasing how, because Cohen also was again at that infamous Trump Tower meeting where they, after the Russians solicited that they could help, the Trump campaign team met with them. The only question about that Cohen's going to confirm, hopefully with some sort of evidence, is that the president knew about it. Now, again, the president's lied about everything so far. I mean, and just blatant lies, particularly about the McDougal payments and the Stormy stuff. And it's just, I mean, it's just such blatant lying. So why wasn't he lying about the other meeting? He was. And you'll see this too. I mean, almost all this stuff that's come out that looks really bad, and he's like, no, that didn't happen at all. And he lies with great confidence, but he is, without a doubt, a liar. And we have this now. So this does move us into another stage, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Manafort guilty on 8 of 10 counts. I think the total potential maximum time served for this was, I think, somewhere in the realm of 60 years. I don't think that's quite enough to push him over the edge yet, because again, if he flips on Putin, he's probably a dead man. So they only got 8 of 10 counts because apparently there was one of those maggots kind of folks on the jury who just decided that rules don't matter and laws aren't real, and the real victim here is Trump and his team, and all the laws that they break don't really count. So they held out. That was what took so long, and then they came and asked the judge, "What do we do when somebody's a complete idiot, won't listen to anything?" And they're like, "You got to try and talk to him." And nobody appeared to be successful in that. And so the majority of the accounts were held as a mistrial. So just to be clear on that, you can be found guilty, you can be found not guilty, and you can also have this unfortunate situation. This is essentially a jury nullification. If you've ever heard of that concept where somebody just puts their foot down and says, "Nah, I don't think it was bad." And then everybody else is like, "Well, literally, here's what the law says, and here's what it says we're supposed to do. And we're supposed to be judges here, and impartial judges, and just read the law, look at what happened, and say," but you can, because people have will, and that's how democracy works, and these concepts exist. You say, "Nah, I don't care. Not guilty. This is all a witch hunt." And that's apparently what happened on a number of charges for the Manafort jury. But there was still enough to get that last one, so we'll see what goes on with that. He's got another trial coming up here in a few weeks. And we'll see if they try and retry this other one. I think the judge in this last case was a little bit prejudicial, but I didn't follow it that terribly closely. But so, just to recap, right, that's the president's personal lawyer and the president's campaign manager, both found guilty of multiple felonies, one for straight up admitting it, the other by a jury. So this last week was huge on that front and has taken things to another level. The Catholic Church has a lot of problems. I wasn't going to talk too much about this because I haven't really read all the details because I don't want to. But apparently they were running some child porn stuff and just really horrible kind of abuse that was systemic and covered up. I'll probably have a little bit more on that later. It's difficult because it's one of those things that's, oh, wow, Catholic abuse, huh? It's like a cliche at this point, which it sucks. And this is one of the things that's been kind of the breakdown of our, society. And this is a larger thing. We don't really talk about it much here, but kind of on the whole dystopian side. These, what used to be institutions of authority and moral authority have been shown to be so exposed at this point. And this is just on a personal note, right? My wife's family was ostensibly Catholic. My family growing up was Mormon. None of our kids are going to be raised in these religions. They've really just shown to not have that moral character and fiber that they claim to. And when you have that kind of claim and can't back it up, it becomes, to me, not particularly worthwhile to follow up. There was, and I mentioned the Urban Meyer thing. This is part of another news. Most of my viewers probably not familiar with him. If this was a sports show, I think they've been talking about that quite a bit more. He essentially got kind of a slap on the wrist after they found out that he had what was essentially lied to the media about his knowledge of the situation and his reaction to it. That anything happened to him at all, I think, is pretty surprising, given the stature and just the power. Some people think it was a bit. I have actually that it was a wrist slap and 3-game suspension for a 12-game season is not huge, but it's not nothing. I think it definitely sends the right kind of message, I think, to the people who are in this industry. How this is going to work going forward, again, is going to be difficult because human history hasn't really... I don't know if we've actually made it to this point where this is unacceptable in a society that I'm familiar with. I know there's kind of an idealized one that we have, and hopefully we can get there. I would certainly like to get there, where this kind of stuff doesn't get pushed under the way and we get in front of this instead of trying to catch back up on everything. So now one of the big things, the President of the United States appears to be a criminal. So from my standpoint, people are talking about this, and I had some discussion on NPR and a couple other places today. talking about, well, he didn't, tell him to do it unless he can prove that he did it and made these payments, then it's not really, and it's just campaign finance stuff, and it's, everybody kind of breaks those laws sometimes, and so I don't think this is the tip of the iceberg on the criminality that we're going to see exposed from this investigation. I think there's some pretty extreme money laundering that's been going on. Tax evasion, the collusion, which is the conspiracy to steal an election. I do think now we also have a much stronger argument that the position that he holds was obtained by fraudulent means. And what I mean on that is, you cheated on the campaign finance stuff to pay off someone. The whole idea between a lot of our campaign laws is so we know who is spending money on what. And when it comes out a couple weeks before the election that the Trump campaign is spending $250,000 to pay off a couple mistresses, that's big news that voters need to know before they make their decision. And I think it would be, considering the closeness of the election, and personally I think there was that 4 or 5% of the country that was waiting until the last bit, those kind of both sides are the same people that frustrate the ever-living hell out of me. And we're waiting for something to happen to give him one way or the other to go. And what happened wasn't that this news came out, that he was paying off these, or that he'd had these affairs, that he'd lied about all this time, which I think would have been a real huge death blow right before the election. But in fact, it became Comey's letter to Congress, to Jason Chaffetz, which he then immediately leaked about the reopening of the investigation, and then closing it again even made it look more like they were all in on it, which was terribly unfortunate for the country. But anyway, so the fact that he cheated to win, and we really know this now, right? We were very clear. We have to let that play out for a little bit. And when I say that, so the impeachment discussion, people are like, well, he should just be impeached for that. Well, impeachment is run by the House, and the Senate acts as the jury. So if you think a majority Senate of Republicans is going to convict him for this, when it looks like a number of them have done worse, it's not going to happen. And even right now, there's more Republicans talking about impeachment than there are currently sitting Democrats. I think the Republicans would love to make this election about impeachment, because we haven't seen exactly what laws and high crimes and misdemeanors that the president did. Now we're right next to it, right? We're standing next to it. We have him on tape actually asking the guy to do this. But that hasn't been proven in a court, there's a weird catch-22 that a lot of, especially conservatives, are pushing right now. Well, he hasn't been convicted of a crime, so he can't do it. But he literally can't be indicted, so he can't be convicted while he's sitting. So, I guess we can never get him for anything. That kind of catch-22 stuff. And that's the way the Constitution is written and set up. That's kind of intentional. Because, again, the remedy is Congress. The partisan level of Congress that we have now is part of what's making it so frustrating that they can't admit that this has happened. I want to point out, by the way, the first 2 congressmen in the House that endorsed Trump have both been indicted this last month I saw. Collins up in New York for insider trading, and then Duncan Hunter, the new one, in California for spending campaign money on Steam games. Yeah, that Steam sale, it's hard to ignore. But so those are the first 2, and I really am curious to know who the third one was, so we can put a little bit of prediction on who the next congressman to get indicted, because there's going to be more. I think when you see this kind of stuff, and it's been so evident, there's a lot of dirty money that's been flown around, and it usually takes a fairly big purge. And when you had a situation, too, where you had kind of the dirty money flowing around in a campaign that didn't think they were going to win, but are huge grifters, there's a lot more of this stuff that's going to come out. And it sounds like Cohen is more than ready to talk. I would love to see him go to Congress and talk, but again, the partisan congressman with Republicans in control, how much of that's going to happen? What kind of hearing? Again, the House investigation into all this stuff ended months ago. So, That's the House stuff. So I do think they need to. Definitely, the Dems can take the House. It's looking like 50-50 or better by most of the projections at this point. Go out, please vote for your House. Remember, every House member is up for election every 2 years. Even though they're midterms, we still get to replace the House. And I'd like to see them do that and then start to do some investigation so we can see, so it becomes so evident that law breaking and these high crimes have happened. So I do think some patience is needed, of course, but it's tough when you have a week like this. And you have the president just saying such ridiculous, stupid crap. I mean, like Mueller is Stalin and McCarthy. And the McCarthy thing is really, really funny because, again, back in New York, Trump grew up and one of his mentors was this guy named Roy Cohn, who was just a nasty-ass lawyer. He ended up getting disbarred, and I posted about this last week. He got disbarred in New York for holding a client's signature and making him sign a new will while he was sedated in the hospital that gave Cohn control over his estate, made him the executor of his estate. I remember Roy Cohn because his name is Roy, so I always kind of notice Roys when I see them in the news and history. And I remember him from way back in the day. He's actually... from what I understand, he was into having gay sex and also bashing gay people in public. One of those, and eventually actually got AIDS and died from it. And he's in, actually, I think it was Angels in the Outfield, I think. Might be one of those, it's an HBO movie. I think he was a character in that. Because he was part of a little bit, and I remember this a little bit when I was younger, so some of this is some first-hand memories. Because he had some work that he did with the Reagan administration, and they loved him there. But anyway, he actually worked with McCarthy. Literally was his attorney, and that was the connection there. And so you have this direct connection from McCarthy to Cohn to Trump, and Trump is trying to claim that Mueller is the McCarthy, when the Mueller approach is the opposite of what McCarthy did, which was working the media, making lots of outlandish accusations with no evidence to back them up. Sound slightly familiar? It should, because that's what Trump does. We also had this last week, Rudy Giuliani and his truth isn't truth moment, and Chuck Todd, who's the horriblest, worst thing that I think media can have. He's not the worst, but he's really, really bad. Because his notion wasn't like, oh my gosh, you're lying to me, is, oh, we've been memed. Oh, Instagram, what about democracy, Chuck? Anyway, so this whole idea that truth isn't truth and lies and whatnot and all this stuff is so malleable is really, really dangerous, I think, for us. Moving right along. Like I've said before, once you give into the lies, then whatever they want to sell is already sold and you've already bought it. Because there's no way to counteract that if you destroy it. So, they also, this last week, this has been a crazy bad week for the White House after they had a couple days of decency. A white nationalist, another writer that they had, a speechwriter with white nationalist ties, had to resign. Yesterday, the president was watching Fox News, and Tucker Carlson did one of his white supremacist segments on this conspiracy it's really this white nationalist conspiracy theory about what's happening in South Africa with the farmers, and the president directed the Secretary of State to start looking into this. And this is a white nationalist conspiracy theory from Tucker Carlson's Fox show that the Secretary of State was ordered to begin investigating. So it's one of these things, like, how much of this is just straight distraction? How much of this is trying to just be these aren't dog whistles. This is, as somebody else mentioned, this is not a dog whistle. This is like a dog 1812 overture. We're going to put the State Department at work investigating your conspiracies, oh my white nationalist brothers. That kind of message coming from the White House is extremely disturbing and just gives more impetus to the rest of this. And part of what makes the patience so difficult. Because the patience of the investigation is going, and it keeps going, and they're going to keep picking off people. And I think they're going to start going after, because I think we're getting close now to start going after Trump Jr. Because again, what they did with that meeting was wildly illegal, and that's, that's what we know about, much less the people who've been investigating this for a year and a half with all the resources possible. So it's happening. I think we just got to be patient and let it go. I think there might be a moment where eventually a large portion of the country is going to have to go to Washington to really make that final point of no, go away. And that's part of why is this next thing. So ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, that wonderful group that has such a great reputation for honesty and decency now. The people, remember, they were taking kids away. We'll talk about that here in a moment. They're using traps for people who are trying to get green cards. So in a situation where you go and you have an interview with the Immigration Service, the USCIS, I guess, and then they would tip off ICE that someone who was currently in the country legally, right, and wanted to sponsor somebody who wasn't, but that person who wasn't came to the interview to demonstrate, hey, I'm a good person, blah, 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 ICE would be there and pick them up. And they were telling them. It says, when immigrants and their spouses showed up for interviews at USCIS offices, employees would alert ICE that they had arrived, and so they'd come and grab these people. While they're trying to do interviews in order to obtain legal status and go through, say, oh, you got to do this and do that to get it right. And be like, yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, well, you're not there yet. So, boom, handcuffs gone. They've been doing this, and they said that they had spread them out over a period of time in different areas so as to avoid major spikes in attention, that people realized this had become a policy, that they were doing this intentionally to try and clear out the possibility of these people applying for citizenship. I want to underscore something here, and there's a strange dynamic that's been going on with the president publicly castigating the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, repeatedly for... See, the president wants him to end the Russia investigation because he thinks he should be his personal attorney. He's not the Attorney General for everyone. He's the attorney personal, like Cohen used to be, where he'd just fix stuff and then send him a bill, and then he'd be like, yeah, pay that out of the account, and then blah, 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 right? And that's what he thought the Attorney General should be, because, again, he's got no concept of how the U.S. is supposed to run. But Sessions isn't doing that, and it's not protecting his back to the degree that he wants. What Sessions is doing is pushing this white nationalist agenda, because, again, the Attorney General oversees the immigration system. And by making all these other determinations and laws, like the idea that domestic abuse and gang violence are no longer reasons for asylum, which is one of the biggest reasons why people try and come, two of the bigger reasons why people do and are able to abstain and come to this bright, shining hope of a country in the world. That would be the one that we used to be. But Sessions has been tearing this stuff apart. Like somebody who knows the system and is a freaking white nationalist, and just is really pushing for this. And it's been really bad. The dynamic of where Sessions is doing probably more than anyone to really push the hardcore immigration agenda in ways that I don't think the president even knows or is aware of. But he's not ending the investigation, so he's not actually protecting him. We'll see. There was some chatter earlier today that Sessions, after the election, if the Republicans win, will be fired, and he'll be replaced by somebody who will end the thing. So again, this election is really, really big deal for that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's still over 500 kids and families that have been torn apart by Sessions' policy and ICE, and that haven't been reunited. And it looks like the effort that they're putting in to reunite them is not large at this point. And they are relying on NGOs and other people to try and track down these basically poverty-stricken people in Central America in some village somewhere and say, hey, we have your kid. It's so horrible. And one of the things that sucks about it, and the big divide in this country, is this is so horrid, and there's 500, 700, the numbers are large, and every one of these are real children being traumatized and taken away. And if you have kids and you think about it, this really quickly becomes overwhelming. This is evil shit. The right wing in this country hasn't really talked about this much at all. Conservative media has largely ignored this. They said Obama did the same thing, which was a lie, and then lied about other stuff, and then followed the president saying, well, this is their own fault, they should have come here. And then this last week, there was a girl who'd been missing for about a month, pretty white girl, so she'd been in the news. Turns out that the guy who murdered her, there's some question about his immigration status. Apparently, his lawyer said he was here legally. The Trump administration in the White House is running with the notion that he is not, and the wall would have saved him, and they're going off on this. And there's hundreds of kids that they've taken, and they drew a direct parallel between they have to separate those kids or more people will be murdered. And it's one of those this is why they're so disgusting, and those lies are so bad, because that's what they want to tell. That's the lie that they want to tell. That all of this is justified for that. And the murder of this girl is horrible. Apparently, this is more of a toxic male thing than it is an immigrant thing, because he apparently followed her, and then she rejected him, and then something happened. He claims to have forgotten, and then he found a dead body in his trunk. Another story here in Colorado is this horrible person who apparently murdered his wife and 2 kids. He's a citizen, white guy, way more horrific from the murderous evil standpoint, but doesn't fit the political narrative of the White House. And so we get this really nasty attack on immigrants to justify a really nasty attack on immigrants and their families, claiming that somehow taking kids away protects anyone. But those are the lies that we're dealing with in this year, 2018. So the Yemen school bus, I talked about this. Again, there's been a lot of other news in the world that we missed because of the dumpster fire running the show right now. There was a bomb, killed a ton of kids, hit a school bus. It really has highlighted some of the... And there's been a lot. The war there has not been particularly nice. But these are now our weapons that are being used because the State Department under Rex Tillerson approved their sale to Saudi. The previous administration and Obama had not, and said, no, you can't have these. We don't trust what you're going to do with them. And now we see what happened. Just facts. Wages are stuck. Corporate profits, bonuses are through the roof. $1 trillion deficits are here. The GOP tends to be pretty fine with this right now. Democrats are not. You're seeing a much starker thing move through that. I'm going to do a couple things real quick and then end this stuff because it got late started and it's late and got things. The trade war with China has expanded and we just put more stuff in. We're now implementing the 2.5 round, I think. They're doing the exact same, continue to match for match. Our next step is everything from China gets a tariff. And their next step is we start fucking with your shit in ways that are different. Because they can't respond en masse the same way if we go up to, all 700 whatever billion dollars. One of the curious things about this is it's not doing much. The trade deficit actually continues to get larger. So we'll see how that works. I think, again, the trade wars are going to continue until not right before, but within spitting distance of the 2020 election, if this guy is still in office, because the whole idea here is, again, your arsonist firefighter who starts the fire, puts it out, claims credit for both sides, for fixing everything and whatnot. Final thing, Mississippi and Medicaid. They put together a work requirement in Medicaid that says you have to work 20 hours a week in order to qualify for Medicaid in Mississippi. there's also a income threshold that if you make more than that amount, you can't qualify for Medicaid in Mississippi. And that, a few years ago, they lowered to $3,000. Just to say, if you make more than $3,000, you're obviously an able person who doesn't need Medicaid. And if you want to get Medicaid, you have to work 20 hours a week. Now, 20 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, right? 1,040 hours. So you have to work for less than $3 an hour in Mississippi for 20 hours a week in order to qualify for health care. This kind of ridiculous, absolute fucking insane concept is why Medicaid for all is currently polling at about 70% in this country. The poll I saw today actually showed Republican support just over half. I hope this happens soon. This might be what pushes it, it's time. This stuff is getting so ridiculous, and the way that the GOP and Republicans are trying to tear apart the ACA is really just going to engender this next step. So hopefully that can happen too. So if you really want to worry, like, what might the backlash to Trump's ridiculousness be if we can actually get him out of office and make some stuff, we might get Medicaid for all. Medicare for all. Maybe we'll call it something else. We'll see. Anyway, alright, thanks for hopping by. Been a quick show and a long week, so crazy news this week on the legal front. Still of it shaking out as we speak, and we'll see some more, definitely. There's a lot more crimes that have happened. So, y'all have a good week. Peace out. I'll see you next time. And hopefully my printer will work and can be a little bit closer on time. Alright, good night, y'all. Have a good week.